anyone but Huawei. That's the message from the US as it considers financial help for countries upgrading to 5G technology. Huawei says it's not controlled by Beijing bureaucrats. Why is Washington so worried by one of China's most successful and innovative companies? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Bernard Smith. The United States says it's willing to finance other countries' 5G networks so long as Huawei isn't involved. President Donald Trump accuses Beijing of using its influence over Chinese companies to spy on other countries. In the UK, Huawei has been given permission to build a new research facility. That's while the country's cybersecurity agency conducts an emergency review into the use of Huawei's 5G equipment. The Chinese firm says it will invest more than $1 billion in its new site in the east of England, while insisting the focus will be on the development and manufacture of semi-conductors, which, according to Huawei, are not targeted by US sanctions. But Washington has warned the British government that the decision to approve the new project will put its trust in the UK at risk. The US Department of State has issued a statement saying it believes countries need to be able to trust that partners will not threaten national security, privacy, intellectual property, or human rights. Adding, a company such as Huawei is subject to an authoritarian government that lacks an independent judiciary or rule of law that would effectively prohibit the misuse of data. The statement also urged allies like the UK to carefully assess the long-term impact of allowing what it called untrusted companies like Huawei access to sensitive information. Now, the US and China have been at odds over trade and economic policies for the last 2 years. When the crisis began in 2018, trade amounted to more than $737 billion, but it's declined considerably since then. In January, Washington and Beijing agreed on a first step towards a truce. China promised to open up its markets and buy more American goods. In exchange, the US agreed to lift some of its tariffs, but not all, leading to yet another standoff. And the International Monetary Fund cited the dispute when it cut projections for global growth to the lowest since 2009. Let's bring in our guests. Joining us from New York is John Biggs, a reporter for TechCrunch. In Beijing, Andy Mock, a senior research fellow at the Centre for China and Globalisation. And in London, Nishanth Sastry, a visiting researcher at the Alan Turing Institute at the University of Surrey in the United Kingdom. Welcome to you all. John, I'll begin with you. I guess a straightforward question for you. What will 5G let us do that 4G can't? How important is it going to be for a country's economic development?
In many cases, it's going to be very important. The biggest difference in 5G is the internet speed. You're going to get, I guess you could say, landline speeds, the sort of speeds that you get in a home in an urban area in the U.S., which is connected to fiber optic cables or other systems. You're going to get that over the air, and you should be able to get that countrywide, depending on the coverage of 5G products, 5G routers. So it's going to be a really big difference.
OK. And Nishanth, what are the major technological innovations that can be exploited by 5G or the 5G can exploit? What are you looking forward to?
So 5G itself is a standard, and it's the next generation from the previous 4G that we are used to, and several new applications have been proposed, ranging from some more forward-looking ones, such as remote surgery or connected cars, to even just being able to download your movies much faster than you can in today's technology. So that's the promise of 5G.
OK. And Andy, artificial intelligence is one particular area that's going to benefit from 5G, I understand. And China's particularly invested in that, particularly in developing mass surveillance technology and facial recognition. Huawei has helped to develop this. So you can see why, if Beijing is, China is a country intolerant of political dissent, other countries might be suspicious of working with companies that work with the Chinese government. Is that a fair point?
I think it is. I mean, there's two issues here. So AI, artificial intelligence, and 5G are complementary technologies, and they are the classic disruptive technology like electricity, in that it can be used for everything, as our earlier guest said, for consumer applications, industrial applications, even military applications. So I think anytime there's a new disruptive technology, people are concerned, and I think that they rightly should be. Technology is a double-edged sword, which is why I think it's important that we all work together to ensure that there are proper standards, proper safeguards, so that everyone can not only be safe, but also feel safe.
John, is the US right to be very nervous about Huawei's dominance in the 5G market?
I think it's kind of a silly statement in terms of Huawei's dominance versus Siemens' dominance versus Nokia's dominance. You can get 5G hardware from multiple sources right now, and for them to single out Huawei is a bit unfair. Obviously, there are some issues with Huawei. Obviously, there's some concerns in terms of privacy, in terms of security, etc. But to completely cut someone out of that space is very dangerous and very damaging. And absolutely, I want our 5G to be as secure and super as possible. But I think that a box on a light pole somewhere in the middle of Brooklyn has very, very little to do with this whole political storm that's brewing.
Nishanth, do you think the US is right to be putting such pressure on European governments, on Asian and African governments not to get involved with Huawei because of the fears of surveillance?
So let me be clear. So maybe I should clarify that this is a highly political question. So I should clarify that I'm talking as an individual rather than as a representative of any organization. So, you introduced me as a visiting researcher at Alan Turing Institute and a professor at the University of Surrey. So I'm not representing any of these institutions when I'm saying these things.
Fair enough.
And not even as a professional, but as an individual. So what I would think is, this, harking back to what the previous speaker was saying, if you shut out one entity amongst a set of competing entities, then you are decreasing the space of competition around a technology. Now, this is a fairly maturing technology at this point. So the main research that went into 5G happened in the last 4 or 5 years. But still, there's a lot of innovation to come. And if you're shutting out one aspect or one entity that's playing a role in that innovation, then you're shaping that innovation, you're curbing the way in which that innovation can spread. And so in that sense, I would say perhaps there should be more openness around it. Now, I recognize, as the previous speaker said, that there are security concerns, but the precise nature of those security concerns have not yet been made clear for whatever reasons. So maybe there are national security reasons and so forth. But without full details, it would be hard for me to say why a country should stop one of the competing entities, such as Huawei, from competing in a market for what would be several billions of dollars of commerce that could arise from this. All right,
Andy, how did Huawei rise to this dominant position? How much help has it had on the way from the Chinese government?
Well, I think there are a lot of misperceptions and maybe even disinformation about this. So Huawei, I think, is the classic Chinese startup success story, perhaps not that different from a Hewlett-Packard or an Apple, meaning started in someone's garage, became phenomenally successful to be a global, a company of global significance, in that Huawei was started by a man named Lin Zhengfei, who was a former engineer, started out reselling computer hardware, invested in R&D very significantly, and literally over decades built Huawei into a global technology leader. And I think it's important to recognize here that Huawei is not just the leader in base stations, the kind of equipment that people typically don't see that the telcos buy, but all the way through smartphones. So Huawei is also one of the top handset companies in the world as well, making other devices. So really soup to nuts, to use an American expression.
Andy, just sorry to interrupt, but the Wall Street Journal reported last year that $75 billion worth of state support had gone to Huawei during its birth and creation. It couldn't have got where it is without that support.
Sure. Well, my understanding of this is that Huawei has a number of customers, so private enterprises, state-owned enterprises, universities, government institutions or government ministries, I should say, but that this is not just limited to China, but all around the world. So again, if we think about the centrality of telecommunications, it really is like electricity, that no modern society, no modern country can function without it. And Huawei really is providing the backbone of this. So I don't think it's that surprising that Huawei would have significant government revenue, including from the Chinese government, but also from other governments as well.
John, could Huawei have got to where it is today without significant support from the Chinese state?
Well, it depends on what we consider significant support. If they're literally shoveling money into the organization to ensure complete control over the technology, that's a little bit iffy. But look at Motorola. Look at any one of these companies that have received grants, that have received contracts to build out the infrastructure for the 21st century, and all of those folks are getting billions of dollars in government grants. We don't know where all this stuff is opaque, right? We don't know how much Motorola got to build out infrastructure in the U.S. We don't know how much Nokia got from the European Union, from any number of countries to build infrastructure elsewhere. And 75 billion is a big number, but it's also a big country, and you need a lot of infrastructure to get something up and running, like even a 4G or 5G network. It's a massive undertaking. So, did they get that money as bribes? Did they get that money as to offer security holes? We don't know that. Is that a danger? Absolutely. But would a traditional technological advance that is open, has a full standard, and is able to be understood by somebody with a little more technical expertise than even us on the call, would that prevent me from wanting to use their software if I have that access, if I can understand what that router is doing? Probably not.
Well, then why has the US, John, fallen so far behind in developing this sort of technology? Its 5G companies are tiny in comparison.
The manufacturing, we're a big manufacturer, but we're not a high-tech manufacturer, unfortunately. On the coast, you could say that we're a high-tech manufacturer. And also, if we want to talk about falling behind, I think one of the primary issues there, his name starts with T and ends with Trump. We've broken a few things here in the country, and it's problematic, and it's very, very frustrating. And I think everybody is trying to work themselves out of that hole. We're working on AI. We're working on autonomous vehicles, etc. And all that stuff needs 5G, and all that stuff needs 5G now to get working for the next 10 years, next 5 years even. So this is I guess this is a big ramping up, and it's going to slow things down, unfortunately.
Nishanth, is it possible for other companies, Ericsson, Nokia, Samsung, they have the similar technology to Huawei? Can they compete? Can they catch up? Can other companies catch up? Or is Huawei so far ahead?
So the thing to emphasize is that telecommunications industry, networking industry has been coming up mainly because of this process of standardization. So 5G is not called 5G without everybody agreeing on what 5G really is, right? So it's, release so and so of a particular organization, an international organization called the 3GPP, which is a historical anachronism in the sense that it's called 3GPP and it's standardizing something called 5G. But everybody agrees on what 5G technology is, and there are different companies that got mentioned, Ericsson, Nokia, Cisco, and so forth, who also adapt and implement equipment to the standard. So yes, there are other companies apart from Huawei who can also give the same kind of functionality that Huawei is offering.
Andy, if you're a company that's benefited so much from government support, down the line, the government's going to want to be able to ask a few favours, isn't it? The government's going to be able to want you to help them out.
Well, I would question the premise of that question, Bernard, but let me go back first and talk a little bit about why the U.S. lost technological leadership. Because if we look back to the days of AT&T and Bell Labs, the U.S. was the unquestioned technological leader. And what happened? I think that the demand for quarterly profits, really the capitalist system, created these pressures where short-term revenue, short-term profits became the top priority. So R&D was cut, gradually withered away. So the company's ability to be on the technological leading edge in telecommunications really was lost. And Huawei, had it been a publicly listed company, might not have been able to invest as much as they did in R&D. So they are a private company, and as a result of that, I think are insulated from these capital market pressures. Now, whether or not they will be subject to pressure from the Chinese government, I think is difficult to say, because any company, whether you're a Microsoft, you're a Google, you're a Cisco, as we've seen in cases in the United States, has been pressured, as we've seen through the Snowden revelations, the other revelations, that this can happen in any country. So I don't know that this is a risk that is unique to China. What we do know, though, is that Huawei has said they are a private company. They are a private company, but that they place the trust of their customers above all else. And when push comes to shove, we have to see what happens.
I suppose the problem is when Huawei says it's a private company is that we know that the system in Beijing is not open, so there's no way of telling really what Beijing, the government, is telling Huawei to do.
Well, I think that certainly it's a different governmental system. And if we look at a place like the US, the UK, maybe some other countries, yes, there are different standards of public transparency. I think that is true. Different countries have different norms, different systems, different regulations. And that is just, I think, it's part of the Chinese system.
OK. John, one of the suggestions, the proposals from the Trump administration is supporting open network technology. Is that a serious way of getting around Huawei's dominance? Would that work?
Well, presumably the 5G standard is open as well. So, I mean, I think the problem with getting three tech nerds on a call like this is that we kind of understand that a 5G box is fairly primitive in terms of what it's supposed to do, in terms of what it can do, and in terms of what it's designed to do. So a box like that, and it would be far more lucrative to hack into a Nokia call switch or some sort of a Nokia system and hide something in there because nobody's looking there. Everybody's scrutinizing the Huawei stuff right now. But in terms of the dangers there, they're fairly limited. And also, open standards are open standards. We already have open standards. And presumably, this is an assumption on my part, I don't have one in front of me, presumably anyone can open up one of these 5G boxes and see what's going on inside, disassemble the operating system, understand the operating system, et cetera. There's lots of places to hide, nooks and crannies, where you could hide something that's dangerous. But even an open standard is dangerous because it can be tampered with at the manufacturing level, at the installation level, et cetera. There's no perfect way to install these things, and there's no perfect standard that's going to make these things completely impervious.
Nishanth, do you think supporting open network technology is a way to stop one company being dominant? I'm conscious of not trying to make this all about Huawei, but maybe suggesting that other companies can get into the 5G business.
Actually, maybe it would be useful to lift this up from this particular context to, the question of whether other governments apart from China, put pressure on companies. And, we've seen various cases, for example, with political ads and what should be allowed on social media platforms and what should not be allowed, where the US government, the EU have all had very, very strong opinions, and they're going to try and impose those opinions on the companies. And the companies likewise have very strong opinions on what they should support and what they won't support. So as just one example, what we are seeing with our research is that there is actually more privacy loss from third parties such as Google ad systems and Facebook ad systems in the UK, in the Western countries, than in comparison with China, where these big companies are blocked because of governmental policies, right? So you could see a case for governmental pressure being put against Google and Facebook in the privacy sector, in the web space as well, not just the 5G space. But yes, so the main thing that 5G brought to the table was actually this openness, that everything would be a programmable, software-defined backbone or core, which would make it much more cheaper for the operators to deliver the services that they should, but also would permit more interoperability among the different equipment vendors and among the different operators that need to internetwork with each other to deliver this global network that we have developed today. So absolutely, open networking is the way to go, and it's not just the US government or the Chinese government, and it's not just 5G or the web space. Everywhere there is this kind of puzzle which happens, as with any other new technology, about what is permissible, what is not permissible, what should be the norm. Okay. And so it's not a unique case in any sense at all.
All right. And Andy, how much is all of this, particularly this focus on Huawei, tied to this general deepening of suspicions by Western powers and some Asian powers of China's ambitions overall?
No, and I think this really is the crux of the question, that what's behind this really is a geopolitical confrontation or rivalry, in that the the American hegemony, or what I think the U.S. calls its global leadership, rests on technological superiority. So when we see a Chinese company like Huawei, that is the clear, not just the technological leader, but also the cost leader as well. And this is as important, if not more so, because the big customers for 5G are not the consumers per se, but the telcos. And many of them struggle with earning a sufficient return on capital. So the cost of equipment is very, very important as well. Okay. So what the U.S. sees in this threat from Huawei is that it could conceivably lose its technological leadership that is not just consumer-based, industrial-based, but militarily-based as well. So I think this really creates a lot of anxiety for the U.S., and so therefore feels it has to stop Huawei at all costs.
All right. OK, gentlemen. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. But thank you to John Biggs, to Andy Mock and to Nishanth Sastry. And thank you, too, for watching. You can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also find us on Twitter. We are at AJ Inside Story, and I'm at Jazeera Bernard. From me, Bernard Smith, and the entire team here in Doha, bye for now.